about to tell you a very disturbing story that occurred to me when I was a 15-year-old boy. I lived in a pretty busy city known as Tacoma in Washington State. It was a regular day at my high school. I was in my biology class. All of a sudden, I felt a tapping on my back. I turned around to see who it was. It was a girl named Emma, who always sat right behind me in biology. She asked me if we could meet up at the park later to hang out. I said yes, obviously, because being the teenage boy I was, I really wanted a girlfriend. She told me we could meet up at the park at 6 p.m., and I said all right. I didn't know exactly why Emma wanted to meet up with me, but I was still excited because I assumed it was because she liked me. Later that day, at around 5:50 p.m., I started to bike to the park she said she wanted to meet at. When I got there, I saw her standing under one of the large trees in the park. I got off my bike and set it down, and I walked over to her. I noticed that when I was approaching her, she gave me a very creepy-looking stare. I asked her what she wanted to talk about. What I heard from her was not what I was expecting at all. She told me she had been stalking me and following me to my house ever since she laid her eyes on me. This completely creeped me out, and I asked her why in the world she would want to tell me this anyway. She told me she finally wanted to let me know she had a crush on me, so she wouldn't have to stalk me anymore. I told her I was very disturbed and creeped out, and I told her to leave me alone. Then I immediately ran back from my bike, got on, and pedaled off back to my house. I got home later, and when it was about the time to go to bed, I did. About half an hour after I lay down in bed, I heard a tapping on my bedside window. I looked over and was horrified to see Emma's face peering in at me. I screamed and ran to my parents' room, pretty much pounding the whole door down. When my dad answered, I told him that I saw a girl named Emma from my school looking through my window at me. He seemed taken aback by this, and he agreed to walk around the house to see if she was still there. He came back in the house and told me he saw her running away from our front yard right when he stepped out into the front step. I was glad to hear she left our yard, but I still had a hard time falling asleep that night. The next day when I went to school, I noticed that Emma wasn't there. I was relieved by this, but I was also confused because she was almost always at school and never missed a day. She continued to not show up at school for the whole rest of the week until on Friday I decided to ask one of Emma's friends why she wasn't showing up to school. Her friend said that she had transferred schools and would not be coming back to our school. I was so happy to hear the news, but now it makes me wonder why she transferred schools and if her parents somehow found out that she was stalking me. Luckily, I never saw Emma again. This happened when I was a kid. I was probably about 12 or 13, and it was about 10 years ago now. My older sister used to be involved in many school activities, such as performing arts and some music. Me and my younger brother would often have to go to her school plays or recitals. Some of them were fine, but many of them got boring fast. One night, we read another one. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I know that we were there, and my brother and I got pretty bored. During the first intermission, my brother and I left the auditorium. The Performing Arts Center was at the far end of the school, and it was nighttime now. The entire rest of the school was basically empty. We could see that many of the lights in the distance were off, as just this wing was being used. Still, there was no reason why we couldn't do a little bit of exploring. We were kids and loved to have fun or make up games any way we could. We walked down one of the school hallways until we reached another one that was really quiet. I remember that as we walked down this hallway, some of the lights turned on automatically. I think we went down like 3 or 4 hallways until we were really far away from everybody else. Things were much quieter there. I had a little rubber bouncy ball in my pocket, and I took it out and my brother and I started playing around with it. We were playing catch and just bouncing it around, trying not to make too much noise. We didn't want to get in trouble or anything like that. This went on for about 5 minutes or so, and it was a good time until we heard a noise. The noise was not coming from back in the direction that we had came from, but at the end of the hallway that we were in. Things were really dark over there. My brother and I stopped playing with the ball and listened. We couldn't really hear anything anymore. My brother started to walk over into the direction of the noise. I didn't have a good feeling about it, but I followed him. At the end of the hallway, there was a room with the door open. We both got over there and went inside. We turned the light on, and it wasn't very bright. It was like a classroom, but it didn't look like it was being used as a classroom from what I remember. There were some desks inside and such, but there were all kinds of things scattered around the room, and there wasn't as many desks as would typically be in a classroom. We wandered around there for a few seconds, and it seemed empty. I guess the noises that we heard could have been coming from another room, or down another hallway. We played around with the ball in that room for like under a minute. When we were inside the classroom, we were towards the back, bouncing the ball around. I turned around towards the front of the class and froze. All of a sudden, I saw a man standing inside the classroom with us. He was the creepiest looking person I had ever seen. I specifically remember the guy was kind of hunched over and looking right at me. He had long, stringy blonde hair that was partially covering his face. I probably jumped back when I saw him. My brother saw him after me, and I heard him start to say something, but he stopped. The guy then slowly started walking over to us. It was very obvious that he didn't work for the school in any capacity, and he probably wasn't supposed to be there at all. As he walked over to us, he stood up and was much taller than my brother or me. We were already kind of at the back of the classroom. My brother was to my right and sort of by the wall, and I was kind of in the middle, more lined up with the man. My brother started to run for the doorway, and I ran to the side of the room and followed him out. The man kind of took a few steps in our direction, but we were both able to make it out of the classroom. We could hear the man walking towards us. Once out into the hallway, we looked back and saw the guy coming out. We were standing maybe 50 feet away, wondering what on earth had just happened. Then the man started sprinting after us. My brother and I took off running as soon as we saw that. We made it around the corner and all the way back to the first hallway. We didn't stop running until we had made it near the Performing Arts Center. When we got there, the man didn't follow us anymore. I'm not sure at what point he stopped chasing us, but we were just happy to be back. We went inside and watched the rest of our sister's performance. We never told anybody about the guy we had seen. I forgot about it a few times, but I remember it here and there. It was a really scary experience. This happened back when I was a kid. It all started on a normal school day. I lived not too far away from the school that I attended. In fact, I lived so close that I would walk to and from school every day. It took about 10 minutes, but I didn't mind it at all, and I actually enjoyed walking. I never considered myself to be in any kind of danger either, and our area was generally pretty safe. My parents had warned me when I was a little kid about suspicious things and to always be aware. So one day, as I was walking home from school, there was a car driving on the road a little ways behind me. It came up kind of out of nowhere. I was almost halfway home and was walking on a residential street. Other than the first street, which was the one that the school was on, all of the rest were residential. The car was an older looking Ford Taurus, I remember that. It was silver and had tinted windows. I was walking on the sidewalk on the left side of the road, and even though this was a residential street, a car would still move a lot faster than I was walking. I only noticed the car when I heard it approaching, but it just never passed. As I was walking, the car seemed to be moving with me, and after looking over and seeing the tinted windows, I got really suspicious. I continued to walk down the street, hoping that this was just a coincidence. The way the neighborhood was, the homes were kind of up a hill a little bit, and there were large trees near the sidewalk. It would not be that obvious to other people in the area that I was possibly being stalked by a random car. I kept walking with the car following me for a minute or so. Then I stopped where I was. I bent down to pretend like I was tying my shoe. I wanted to see if the car would stop too. It did. I had a really bad feeling now. Why was this car following me, and who was driving? I kept walking, and the car continued to drive about 10 feet behind me. I was going to be coming up to a place where I would have to cross the road, and I didn't want this guy following me all the way. I decided to take a shortcut. From where I was, I knew exactly where my house was, and if I crossed through some people's yards, I wouldn't be followed. I turned and ran through somebody's front yard into the side of their house. Then I cut through the side of their backyard and was soon in the next street over within a short time. I ended up cutting through a little park as well and walked down one more sidewalk. Then I was on my street. This cut the time to get home by probably 3 or 4 minutes, and I normally wouldn't do that because I didn't want to run through people's properties, but this did get me away from the car, and I got back to my street with the car nowhere in sight. I was really glad that I had lost it. I still didn't know who would do something like that or why though. I figured it was just a random thing. Maybe somebody was just trying to scare me. I didn't tell my parents or anyone about it, and I soon forgot. I know I really should have, but it just didn't seem like a huge deal to me. For about a week, everything was fine. I walked to and from school every day with no problems. I didn't notice the car at all, and I wasn't thinking about it at all either. It never even came to my mind. But then, one day, about a week later, I was walking home at about the same point as before, and I heard a car coming up behind me again. This happens sometimes, so I didn't even remember the car at first, but it didn't pass me and once again tailed me a little ways back. That's when I remembered it. This was the exact same place where the exact same car had done it before, and I looked over and saw it was a silver Ford Taurus. I couldn't believe this was happening again. I remembered what I had done before to lose the car, and I decided that I would have to do that. I ran up to the side of somebody's yard and then took the same shortcut that I had the previous time this happened. I got back to my street and only had about another minute or so to walk. I had lost the car again, but I was shocked when I saw it had returned. When I was almost to my house, I saw the car entering my street. I looked behind me, and it was there. How did it know that I would be here? I started running for my house. It wasn't too much farther away. I didn't want the car to know where I lived, but I also just wanted to get home. When I got up to my driveway, I ran up it and quickly got inside my house. I watched from the window as the car slowly drove down the rest of my street. I was really glad to see it gone again. This time, hopefully, it was gone for good. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. That very same night, when it was getting late, at about 10 p.m., I was planning to go to bed very shortly. However, I was working on my math homework, which was really difficult for me. I was in my bedroom at my desk, which looked out to the front yard and to the street. When I was finishing up, I saw a car driving slowly down the street. I noticed the car slowly coming to a stop. It was the same car as before. I ran out of my bedroom and called for my parents. They were still up and came to my bedroom to look out the window. We were just in time to see the car driving away. My dad went outside to the end of the driveway and looked down the road. The car was gone. For the next few weeks, I rode the bus to and from school and did not walk home. After that, I never did see the car again.